I made a game for Brackey's Game Jam 2025.2 and this is how it went. To give some background, I recently entered the Game Maker's Toolkit Game Jam and I put a lot of time and effort into making my game Swope, but the reason I could do this was because I got lucky and had the 4 days of the jam completely free. For Brackey's Game Jam, I know I would be very busy almost all week while the jam was on, so I knew going in I would have to make a game with a smaller scope than my last. Normally, I go into a game jam, make a game based around an idea I have for a game, but for this one, I thought that it would be a cool idea to instead pick something I want to practice and then use the jam as a sort of practical way to practice it. I plan on making Swope into a full game and releasing it, and one of the things I've been wanting to add was more visual juice, like UI floating and hovering, as well as being able to do cool text effects and having satisfying dragging. But when I looked into adding these effects to the game, I encountered a problem with how the game was being drawn. In a 2D game, we draw little images called sprites to the screen. The screen is made up of a grid of tiny squares called pixels. I use pixelart for my games, and if the pixels in my sprites were actually pixel sized, then they would be way too small, so we need to enlarge our sprites when we draw them to the screen. What's more, screens come in a lot of different sizes, so we need to make sure we're enlarging by a sensible number based upon the size of the player's screen. The easiest way to make sure the art fills the screen is to draw the whole game in a small window and then simply stretch the window to fill the screen. It's important to always enlarge pixel art by a whole number scale factor, or else the final image can look distorted, so we might need to add black bars at the edges of some screens. In Love2D, the engine I've been using for my games, there's a library called Push which handles this upscaling very simply. This upscaling works well enough, and a lot of big games like Blasphemous use it to draw their art, but there is an issue with it. Pixels are the smallest we can go. You can't draw half a pixel or a quarter of a pixel, so when something is moving, the smallest amount it can move by is a pixel, but when we are drawing the game smaller and then stretching it bigger, the smallest amount we can move by is a pixel on the small canvas. So if we are scaling up by a factor of 4, this means on the real bigger screen, the smallest amount we can move by is 4 real pixels. This makes small movements look like they're stuttering and gives us no way to have smooth looking small movements. So the next question is, how do we fix this? While making this video, I got a video in my recommended by Barry's Dev Hell, where he shows that games upscaled this way, like Blasphemous, don't have smooth camera movement since pixels have to snap to the grid. In the video he shows a neat trick which can be used to find an appropriate offset for drawing to the screen to make sure that the camera looks smooth. This solved his issue, but it won't work for us here, and we can't use the Push library anymore to make upscaling simple. We need to enlarge each sprite on the screen individually and keep our coordinates in real screen dimensions. But the first issue is, how do we work in real screen coordinates if the screen can come in different sizes? And the answer is very similar to what we were doing before. We can pretend we are drawing to a smaller screen of constant size, and at the very end we multiply the coordinates by the scale factor we're enlarging everything by, which puts the sprites in the same position but on the bigger real screen. The key is to allow our coordinates in the pretend screen to go into decimal values, so that when we multiply by the scale factor, we can access the whole range of real screen pixels. Next up, I wanted to add a way to smoothly rotate sprites. A lot of visual juice can be achieved with a little bit of rotation, but when we just add some rotation in the engine, the sprite looks like this. Rough and jagged edges that look weird as the sprite keeps rotating about. The reason for this is the algorithm the engine is using to work out what colour to draw each pixel. Put it simply, there are 2 options. Linear interpolation will try to blend the colours of the underlying art to make the final image look smooth even though it's confined to a pixel grid, but as a side effect it makes the image blurrier. The other option is nearest neighbour, which simply picks the most common colour inside each pixel to be that pixel's colour. When enlarging our pixel art, we want to use nearest neighbour or else it will end up blurry, but when rotating we need to use linear interpolation to prevent the ugly edges. So the solution is to build a system where we first draw an enlarged version of each sprite with nearest neighbour onto a pretend screen called a canvas. We then rotate this canvas and draw it onto the actual screen with linear interpolation. This way we get the best of both worlds. With a bit of playing around, I also added in a way to give children sprites to a parent sprite. In the game, we might want to have sprites which are supposed to be drawn on top of other sprites, like text on buttons or images that are attached to the same pane. So we want the children's sprites to be attached to the parent sprite, so we only have to tell the parent to move and the children will just automatically follow. Originally, I tried making a system where the children's sprites are drawn onto the parent's enlarged canvas, but this just resulted in them being blurry since they were undergoing 2 different linear interpolation steps. So I changed it so that the parent just passes on its position and rotation to the children and make sure they are drawn after the parent. With this new prototype of the sprite system in place, I drew up some pixel art inspired by the game Die in the Dungeon. Outlines are thick and switch to a darker shade at points to give the effect of shading, while keeping the middle a flat colour with some slight shading around the edges. The theme for this jam was Risk It for the Biscuit, and my idea for a simple game to test out this new prototype was to create a game about dogs gambling biscuits in a casino. I took a lot of inspiration from Buckshot Roulette and the 21 DLC from Resident Evil 7. You duel an opponent in a simple 1 vs 1 card game where the rules get ramped up as you go. I went for the incredibly deep and strategic game of High Card, a game where 2 players each draw a card and whoever has the bigger one wins, and I decided the opponent would be a snazzy talking dog. I added in the pieces of the dog to the game and added some effects for hovering. I made it so his hands can slide to a target position. I made it so the background and the player's hands follow the mouse. The background even has a little parallax effect where the closer bits move faster than the further away bit to give the effect that you're looking around the room. I also worked on adding text to the game. The idea was to take a sentence and create a sprite for each letter, which would then allow me to apply hovering effects to each letter individually and create nicer text effects than in my last game, Swope. I got the text coming in letter by letter and the hovering working well. A random offset is applied when a letter is created so that they aren't all in sync. I had some trouble spacing out each letter properly, but since the only character speaking would be a talking dog, I leaned into it and made the font look messy. Now, like I said earlier, I didn't have much time to work on the jam this week, so at the point where I had all this done, it was already Friday and the game would need to be finished by Sunday morning. I considered just not finishing, as I had only managed to get in about 8 hours of work at this point, and I had finished a prototype for my sprite system already. I could have just spent the rest of my weekend relaxing, but I decided I wanted to see it through and finish the game as best as I could in the 2 days I had, so I locked in. Over the next 2 days, I worked hard to get the game finished. First, I added in a system for scripting each text box in the game. We put in the text and can also enter any text effects or instructions for the eyes, mouth and hands of the dog. Next up, I made the card game playable and added some nice visual effects like cards flying in and the deck wobbling when it's shuffled. I scripted an opening scene, a simple tutorial where you play a card and win, a second scene, a proper game of Updog, and then an ending scene where the player reaches for and takes the biscuit in the middle of the table. I added in a main menu which pans over to the opening scene. I added game over and victory screens, then I made it so the dog had a slight chance to misplay, to weight the game slightly in the player's favour, as I felt like the game would be more enjoyable if you could win on your first or second try. I added some sound and music. For the music I used Peritune.com again, as their royalty free music is really good, and for the sounds I tried out using free sounds from Open Game Art. In my last game Swope, I practiced making all the sound effects myself, so I wanted to try using Open Game Art this time and see which one was better. I would say that Open Game Art is a lot quicker and easier, but you sacrifice the ability to get the exact sound you want and might have to settle for something close. With sound and music done, I spent the remainder of my time on polishing this simple game and fixing any bugs or visual glitches with the prototype. Finally, I exported the game to web and then uploaded the finished game. Overall, I'm pleased with how the game came out. Out of all my Game Jam games, I put the least amount of time and effort into this one because I was so busy, but I'm pleased with how it holds up against some of my other games. Now, it's nowhere near as good as Swope, but when compared to other games like Blank and the Case of Stolen Blank, a game I spent longer on, I think Updog looks much more well made from the outside, and on the inside, the code is much nicer and written a lot better. Updog is not my best game, but I'm proud of the progress I can see I've made. The sprite system works well, the desired visual effect has been achieved, and it's very easy to write little movement scripts for new effects that can be slotted in a nice and modular fashion. There are improvements that need to be made to the system. The enlarging step should only be done once, and then whenever the screen changes size. I need to add a bit to allow screen size to actually be changed mid-game instead of just being set at the beginning. Also, when I was trying to add the parent-child system in, I added an extra step to the drawing, which I realised while making this video that I actually forgot to take out, so that needs to be fixed. And also, I want to add some more technical effects like shadows and an easy way to apply shaders. Overall, I would say I'm glad I locked in and decided to finish the game, as it's nice to finish something, and I think I probably would have regretted if I left it unfinished. The jam is still going on, and I've been playing a lot of games and leaving comments again. I feel like the best part of a big jam like this is supporting other developers and everyone motivating each other to keep practicing and improving. Also, some of the entries are really well made, like The Wager, which is a slot machine battle game that looks better than some full games I've played from Steam. Rubber Duck Warriors is a full-on auto battler that was made in a week, and it's really impressive how much content they fit in here and how they managed to balance a game like this in such a short time frame. I'm not going to ramble about all the games I've played here, but go check out the jam if you want to play some yourself and show your support for the developers. If you've watched until the end of this video, please consider liking and subscribing. I've recently decided to work on my first full game, a Balatro inspired Minesweeper roguelike called Swope. If you want to stay up to date and support the development, you can subscribe to make sure you don't miss future videos. I'm currently working on another video about putting this new sprite system in Swope and my current plans for the project. I'm going to keep making games and videos about them, so if that's something you're interested in, stick around.